Hello and welcome to episode 9 of There's Still Time, the AFTN podcast. We're recording the podcast today from the Alpen Club in Victoria Drive, so many thanks to them for opening up their upstairs for us. And we're celebrating after Bayern's win in the Champions League, which I'm sure everyone doesn't really care about. This is one of 2 special roundtables we're doing in this bye week that the Whitecaps have. So we're going to have a look back at the season today and some other stuff, and then in the second one we're going to have a look ahead to the Montreal game. So we're joined by a special panel today. My usual co-host Steve Pander.
Hello everybody.
From the Curva Collective, Zachary Meisenheimer.
Good to be here.
AFTN writer and Southsider Jay Duke.
Hello.
And another pivotal member of the Curva Collective, Massimo Cassano.
Hello.
The angry part of the Curva Collective. I think.
There's just so for the record, there's no the. It's just Curva Collective.
Oh, sorry. Apologize.
You should know that.
I know. Get that out.
So let's just kick things off with a little look back at the Whitecaps season so far. Highs, lows, favourite moments, low moments. How do you think the season's gone so far?
Yeah, I think it's not been the greatest season result-wise. We started off very well. First couple games, very positive, obviously. Home results, really happy with that. Our away form, obviously, was not what we'd like it to be, and kind of sent us into a bit of a lull, a bit of a negative pattern there. From then on, I think coming into the first really busy part of the season, I think things have picked up. The away results have continued to not be great in the league. But with coming into the Voyageurs Cup, I think we've built some confidence in games against Edmonton and even in the first leg in Montreal. And I think we will hopefully continue to build on that. The win over LA was obviously massive to get, I think, things back on track. And I think helped with how we played in Portland and how we played against Portland here and in Montreal. And I think Wednesday, I think, is pivotal for this first part of the season and for us as supporters. I think obviously to finally win the Voyageurs Cup would just be massive, and it's going to be massive either way. Either we're going to win and it's going to be massive, or we're going to lose and it's going to be massively disturbing.
We'll get to the Voyageurs Cup in that moment here, but I want to go back to the part of the form on the road. Like, what is it about their form on the road that has hurt them in their first 3 seasons? It's just not. It seems not to be clicking. Like, Montreal's already kind of turned that around with their opening wins in Portland and Seattle. Jay, what do you think? What is it about their play on the road that completely turns this team into a different side on when they travel?
I think it's an interesting question. Just because if you're comparing this year to last year, which is really what you're going to compare, because those are Martin Rennie's times in charge. And I wrote about this earlier, is that the product has actually looked a little better, especially in Houston, in Chivas, and even at times in San Jose. Although we did get a result in that game, we may not have deserved the draw, but we've looked like we're pushing forward and we're creating more chances. We look like we're more competitive, whereas last year, at the same time last year, there's been a lot of comparisons. How many points do we have this year? How many points did we have compared to last year? We won a lot of games we didn't deserve to win, and we just packed it in at the beginning of last year, hoping to really riding the defense to any sort of results. So, while you can be critical that the points haven't been there, it looked like, at least at first, that Martin Rennie had been moving forward and had been taking a step forward at the beginning of the year. Now, that being said, it's almost like the season so far has kind of turned a little, and it seems like the last few games, even a couple moments at home, that they've really been on the back foot again, and they've been more focused on defending and shutting down and slowing down the game. And I don't know if that's necessarily the answer in the league or with the club that we have here. I don't know if we have the attacking ability to completely dominate and to completely run with Seattle or any of the other real strong attacking teams. But I don't know what the answer is on the road. I just don't think it's packing it in defensively either.
If it has been a mandate from the coaching staff to play more defensively the last few games, I'm not completely surprised, because if you go this long without keeping a clean sheet, I think that is where your focus needs to be. So I'm not too surprised by that. But going back to the idea of why we haven't been successful on the road, I completely agree with you, Jay, that the performances, especially in the first 2 road games in Houston and Chivas, were better than any performances we had on the road last year, even though the results weren't there. And I think what's happening right now on the road, it's completely mental. And I think, even though the season is only, a third of the way in or a quarter of the way in or wherever we are, the turning point already was the Houston road game. The fact that, the Caps had a 1-0 lead. They had that chance to make it 2-0. If you get a positive road result in the first game of the season when the performance was good, that could spur you on. You would have been, the Caps would have been 3 wins, no losses after 3 games. Like, everything would have happened. So you had those 2 positive results at home. You go on the road. You're playing well. You have a 1-0 lead. You have a chance to make it 2-0. It doesn't happen. Up to now, I think that's been the turning point in the season. If they get 3 points out of that game in Houston, who knows where they'd be. And maybe it continues on despite the injuries they had to Kenny Miller in his absence and despite Jay Demerit being out. I think that was the turning point of the season right now. And so then you had that. You had another decent kind of performance in Chivas. And then once you had those 2 negative results on the road, it's just something that perpetuates itself. And I don't know how they turn it around. But I think if they keep that positive mentality and at least try to play, positive things can happen. But that was really the turning point to me. If they would have gotten 3 points in Houston or even held on for a draw in Houston, I think we would see a much better position in the table than we are right now. I mean, if you look at the results as a whole, I think it's really been a mixed bag. But if you look at where they are in the standings, if I got to choose positive or negative, maybe I'll keep to my reputation here and I'll be on the negative side of things because, even though the performances for the most part have probably been okay, the position in the standings is not good enough. And that's something to be concerned about.
Now, does anybody think that I don't want to single out players, but I am going to now. A couple of players that haven't performed well on the road, Alain Rachat and Gershon Coffey, a couple of fan favorites, even me, I love those guys, but they haven't performed well on the road. Is that a carryover from the expansion season? Does anybody think that the mental side of it, like you were saying, it's a mental game? Is that a carryover, or does anybody disagree that?
I personally, I don't think so. I think they both played well in Montreal.
In Montreal, yes, but I'm talking about earlier in the year. They kind of disappear on the road.
I don't think 2011 has any impact on Alain Rachat and how he's playing right now, and I think the same for Gershon Coffey. And I agree with what you were saying, Mass, about it was nice to see in Montreal them kind of be serious about keeping a clean sheet, and I think it helped that it was obviously in a cup match with away goals and all that kind of stuff. And I know when people saw the lineup, I know people were maybe I was when I was told the lineup, I was a little bit caught off guard, but I think it was I think a job. They set out to do a job and they did it, and they almost did it to perfection that night. And I think that's we need to take one game at a time, which I think they're doing right now pretty well. Not perfectly, but pretty well.
But essentially, they played with 6 defenders that game.
Yes,
with Nigel Rio-Coker as a right back, and with Alain Rachat as a left winger, really kind of a really low left midfielder, and with a defensive midfielder who's really a center back in Brad Russin. So while you're right, they got the result. So you it's hard to be too critical, but if they would have lost that game 2-0, people would have been calling for Martin Rennie's head, because they would have said, look at, they've gone ultra defensive, they've brought in all these ex-Rail Hawks who are no good, and they are just trying to pack it in now, and they haven't got any results.
2 things. Brad Russin has and can play holding midfield. I know. I think sometimes people get caught up when Nigel was brought in and when Johnny was brought in. Everyone's like, oh, they can play this position and that position. Then they got here and then people were like, no, Nigel will be a central midfielder and Johnny will only be a center back. And I think Brad Russin is not the same. I think when Brad Russin came in, they said he could play a holding midfield role, and he has for Martin in the past. And I think he did that well. The other thing I would like to say is that, and I know this is part of like, hey, let's talk about things or whatever, and what could have happened, what might happen or whatever. The thing is, we did get the result. So I think to say, if we had lost that game or whatever, sure, of course, people have been disappointed in the lineup, but I think the good thing is the gaffer set out a plan, and I think the players followed it to virtually a T. And really, we could have, or like in many of our games this year, we should have had more goals, or we created enough chances to score at least one goal in that match. And I think we did a great job at holding Montreal at bay, even with the tactics of having like a Nigel playing right back to keep out Romero on our right side on their left side.
I think that's more important than anything right now, especially on the road, because results are what going to bring are what are going to breed confidence for the future. So what that we played well in the first 2 road games? The results weren't there. We needed those points. We didn't get any points, and that's hurt us in the standings. So if they need to play ultra defensively to get the results, to get confidence back up, to get the belief there that they can get something on the road, and then maybe they can start being more attacking, that's fine with it. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see those tactics. For into infinity in the future here. But if that's what they need to do now to get more confidence back in the squad, I can live with that.
Which is what we know our coaching staff is about. They are very big on the philosophy of how do we build confidence in our players. I've heard some of them speak at public engagements before, and this is part of their philosophy, is how do we raise up our players? How do we encourage our players? Which I love, because that's what I think we as supporters are about. How do we encourage our players? How do we help them lift their game? How do we help them, how do we help them play to the best of their abilities, or ideally even above their abilities, which can take on different forms at different times, but ideally I think it should be positive, and that's what this coaching staff is about. And I think that's what they're doing in how they've handled things in the last week or two anyways.
And I think we are going to see it really ultra defensive for the next couple of weeks. When we go to New York, we're going to play the same kind of game that we played in Montreal. We'd expect possibly the same in Seattle, but because it's a local derby, he might want to try and be a bit more attacking. And Martin Rennie was on Whitecaps Daily after a couple of away losses, saying the one thing they needed to focus on was to tighten up at the back. And that seems to be what he's doing. Whether that is going to appeal to not just the supporters, but the casual fan that's maybe sitting watching that on TV. If you're sitting watching those games on TV, is that going to entice you to come and watch the game at BC Place? Now, we know they play differently at BC Place, but if somebody's just sitting at home watching that, do you think that's going to bring it in? Do you think... Why do other teams play the same on the road? When I spoke to Caleb Porter after the Portland game last week, what he said and what so many of the Portland players said was they don't play any differently home or away. And other teams are doing that. You're seeing Salt Lake's going on the road, they're getting points by playing attacking football. San Jose's doing it, LA's doing it. Is it something which we have players that are capable of doing, or do you think Martin Rennie just doesn't feel we've got players capable of being able to play aggressively on the road and cover at the back?
The question is, did they oversell the speed of the players, that how they're going to be playing on with speed with all the new young players coming in? Did they oversell it? Did they oversell it to the supporters?
No, I don't think those players were oversold. I think there was an over expectation on the young rookies from mainly from the media, comparing this team to last year and say, how there's so much more depth and how all this sort of thing. But that's expecting positive results from young players who have never been professional before. I think that was incredibly naive on the people that had those expectations. I don't think that was sold to us by the coaching staff. I think that was, people getting all excited about having a couple high draft picks and just having this automatic expectation that there were going to be, positive contributions right away. But, going back to what Michael was saying, just in terms of why we play differently, I just think it is something that's in the culture of this club right now. In 3 years in MLS, this club has not had success on the road. That's something that needs to be changed. And how you change that, you need to change that by just, results is what changed that. You need to change that mentality, and you do that by getting results. Results will change the performances, and it will just grow from there. And at this point in time, I'm willing to live with that. And if that's something you sit at home and the casual fan on TV watches it, and it's a negative performance and it's a 0-0 draw, something like we kind of saw in Montreal, if the casual fan doesn't really enjoy it very much, too bad. I don't really care, to be honest. I think the result is more important than anything at this point in time.
But is a 0-0 draw in New York, where you get just dominated in possession, outchanced 6-1, and you end up with a 0-0 draw or 1-1 draw, is that really that positive a result? Will the Whitecaps, will Alain Rochat, YP Lee, and Gershon Kofi, who have been having problems with their form on the road, will they go into their next away game and go, yeah, I feel really good about that performance, and I feel like we're really getting it together now. I'm just not sold that that's the way to really build your form on the road, is by just trying to bunker down and really eke out a 0-0 draw, even though you get completely dominated.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to see exactly Chelsea versus Barcelona type defending, but I mean, something that we saw, if it's something along the lines of what we saw in Montreal, I could live with that.
If we look at the last home game, though, against Portland, we were outpossessed 2-1 at home. Now, we got out of that with a draw. We should probably have got a win. Whether we deserve to get a win or not, we should probably have got it the way the game had been going. Do we have the players that can switch from playing so defensive on the road and then can play a different attacking game at home? Or do they then struggle, as we maybe saw against Portland, that they can't then switch the attack and switch on and suddenly dominate games? Or was it just a case that Portland are a team that have done well on the road and have won a lot of possession on the road, and that was maybe just a one-off? Or
could it be? Or also could be also the fact that they were worn out because of 3 games in a week.
Yeah, in my position, from my perspective, I wouldn't confuse possession necessarily with attacking play. I mean, those are two kind of different things. Yes, usually if you have lots of possession, you have the ball and you can attack. But I think you can still be attacking in the sense of not having the majority of possession. In terms of when you do have the ball, it's quick strikes at goal, perhaps a more direct game. And I think that's what we've seen. If you look at scoring chances in that game, even though Portland had the majority possession, I think it's fair to say that we had probably definitely more scoring chances than they did. So I would say that I still think the attacking side of the game at home has been there. The possession has not necessarily been there, which can be a little concerning, and it is a short sample size over the last couple of weeks. I would want to see more if that's something that's going to be a trend in the future. But I would like to see that sort of change. But I think our outlook in terms of how we have approached the game at home has been okay, and I think the results that we've had at home bear that out.
So do you think this is a counterattack kind of tactic change that they want to do, or is this just a possession with purpose that they want to do now?
If it is, it's certainly not what it looked like they were trying to do when they started the season. And that's the part that concerns me a little bit, is that it seemed like they were headed towards possession with intention, try and control possession, especially with a couple guys like with Rio Coker in the middle. I know they had probably high plans for Kobayashi to be a real good possession player, but it looks like it's kind of changing it in front of our eyes right now, and that we're seeing more of a team that is going to be more counter-attacking.
And I wouldn't be surprised that if Daigo's absence is partially responsible for that lack of possession in the last couple of home games. I mean, even though his performance hasn't been spectacular, I mean, that's his type of game, being on the ball. Whereas if you put someone else in there, let's use a Hurtado, for example, he's going to run at you, take on the defender, which is more likely to either turn the ball over or create a cross into the box, which, either it creates a scoring chance, or let's say it goes out for a goal kick, for example, and then the ball goes back to the opposition. So I think Daigo really helps this team in maintaining possession, even though he hasn't been getting the most plaudits for his play over the last little while.
Talking about Daigo then, and if we have a look at the midfield, what I want in the whole team is a lot more stability. We can't keep changing 3, 4, 5 players every single game, because they're just, no matter how much they play together in training, they're just not going to have that gelling aspect. I would like to see a midfield of Rio Coker, Tybert and Kofi get some time to bed in, learn each other's games, how to play off each other. But then if they do that, how do you fit Kobayashi in there? When Kobayashi's fit again, does he come back in the team? And if so, at whose expense? And kind of keeping with the midfield thing, I'll throw this one out to everyone as well. Every team seems to play with a DM in this league. Is that something that the Whitecaps need to do, especially at home? What would the alternatives be? Could you have a 4-man midfield of including Kobayashi and have one of those guys rotating in the DM role? Would that work? Or How would that go?
A couple of things. Daigo's out for a little bit longer. I got to speak to him on Thursday. The earliest he'll be available for selection is New York, but probably more likely Seattle. The DM thing is very interesting. As I understand it, they like to have a shield in front of the back four, obviously. If they play with Jun, they'll play with a single shield. If they don't play with Jun, they want a double shield. So, and this is just how I understand things from certain conversations. So Jun is their single shield option, and if he's not in, then they want essentially, let's say, Nigel and Gersh as a double shield from the back four, obviously with some license for one of them ideally at a time to get forward and support. So I think that's a big part of the midfield question, and what you'll see happen if Jun is starting, he's the single guy. If he's not starting, you'll see two guys ideally holding. So it all depends, and that all depends on how you want to line things up. And I like how the gaffer has said, look, I'm not hung up on formations. We need to be a fluid football team that takes on different shapes at different times. And I think that's important in modern football. The Daigo question is a really good one. Where is he suited best? And as we're talking about him being a very possession-oriented person, I would agree with those who have said he is a little bit wasted on the wing. He wasted out wide. So if we are beginning lining up like a 3-4-3 or 4-3-3, I think he is a little bit lost on the wing. And I do think that Russell can play. I think Russell's favorite position is attacking central midfielder. However, growing up in our residency, as Massimo has reminded me over the time, he played mostly wide left, even though his favorite position was inside.
I never actually thought he played that well in the D2 days when he was playing there.
I don't remember him playing too much in the D2 days, but in the residency program, he played a lot wide left, and that's where Thomas brought him through. Thomas Lindorf brought him through.
But they weren't playing against the top competition either at that time during the residency. They were playing against American teams and stuff like that.
I'm thinking more. I mean, he was playing in the PDL.
Yeah.
And so that's.
Okay.
I mean, at the age he was at that time, I would say that was pretty good competition for him.
So if you want to fit all those guys in and you want to keep a sort of a starting 4-3-3 kind of thing, I agree. I would love to see. I'd love to see Nigel and Gersh together. I appreciate Jun, and I love what he brings and offers the club in terms of options. But not having Nigel and Gersh together there, and I think then you can put Daigo in front of them, and you can put Russell as the wide left or even the wide right in those three. But
why not move to a 4-4-2 sometimes? That's what I personally would like to see, a 4-4-2 diamond. We've talked about it before in other podcasts.
I think I've heard you talk about that before,
and
Steve.
Then with Daigo right behind the strikers, basically.
Yeah.
And then you got Russell, who can play one of the side tips, and he can also move wide if he needs to, stay short. A lot of options there, I think.
My question is, you see a lot of other teams who have a defensive midfielder, and I know that this is probably an unfair, where it's a little unfair to compare Ozzie Alonso in Seattle to a defensive midfielder that we have, because he's so good. But even if you go look at how they're playing in with Will Johnson, Diego Chara in Portland, with you go to Sporting Kansas City, I think it's Nagamura who they normally have playing in the holding role there. They're all players who are responsible defensively but have license to get forward when they want. Whereas it seems, whether by design or whether by Jun's just his natural desire to be sound defensively, he very rarely, and it's hard to be critical because he's had a couple good games in a row, but he's really doesn't contribute anything forward. So why is it that we have to have Gershon Kofi and Nigel Reo-Coker, who are both box to box, sound defensively, but get forward once in a while, type players in midfield, and another player shielding in John Marquez Davidson? Why don't we have... if you want to have the two people shielding, that's great. But then you have an attacking midfielder who is given full license to go and create. Whereas right now we're not really doing that. You're having a defensive midfielder who is extremely, extremely conservative, and two box-to-box midfielders who are not really known for their offensive flair.
I'm not sure. I think part of that is in having a holding midfielder that virtually all they do is primarily hold, not get forward very much. I think the philosophy behind that, and this is my observation and perspective, is that that's done to allow our experienced fullbacks to get forward, which, okay, fair enough, maybe they haven't as much as we would like in some situations.
At home they have.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I think that's a philosophical reason for that. Have one guy who's going to sit, almost be like a third center back or a stopper out front, out front of your two center backs. Which then his job is to read the game and say, okay, Alain has gone forward. I need to cheat left and help fill that spot. Or okay, Lee has gone bomb forward. I need to. So it's
but do you see that around the league? Is that something that you see in every other team? Are the fullbacks reluctant to get forward on other teams because they only have one holding midfielder? You still see a lot of overlapping runs, and hopefully your one holding midfielder, should it be Rio Coker, should it be Kofi, should it be the two of them in a pivot, you would hope that one of them would go, oh, I can't move forward right now. Lee is all the way on the opposing goal line. I better hold back just a little bit.
I think our two fullbacks at home do attack more than the majority of other fullbacks in the league. And I think that gives us our width at home, and I think that's kind of why we've been successful. So I think having a strict holding midfielder at home is not the end of the world. And I think when Davidson's played well, it's looked good. When he's played poorly, it hasn't looked good. So he's taken that criticism justifiably in those situations. So it's pretty much, how do we get Jun's performances to be consistently positive, and then I can live with those negative passes, if you say that, if those backwards passes, because I think that helps the rest of the team to be successful. We just need to make sure that he continues to have good games, because I think when Jun has a good game, it seems like the rest of the team is having a good game as well.
Martin Rennie said after the Salt Lake game, he kind of gave a really strong indication. Away, sorry. When we lost that, he kind of gave a really strong indication that he's going to change the fullbacks on the road. It didn't sound like Rashat and Lee would be playing much away from home. And we know that Lee maybe isn't going to play in the East, because that's been mentioned quite a bit. So who fits in there? Do you see Rio Coker continuing as right back? Is Harvey going to get the chance to play left back? And if he does do that, would you like to see Rashat play in kind of left midfield? Because I thought he was way better as a left midfielder than we've seen recently in away games as a left back.
Well, one thing is for sure is Rio Coker won't be doing that against New York.
No.
So if he's going to do that, he's going to have to go and jump in with Klazura for that spot.
I wasn't there, but Greg looked very positive in the highlights of the Portland reserve match.
Oh, he was
bombing forward.
He was really good.
It looked like when I was watching, I was like, "This looks like I'm watching his college highlights."
But he also looked shaky at times defensively,
which was not in the highlights.
No.
Okay, but I'm willing to give him a shot in the league game, and he hasn't gotten it yet. And before I say no, he can't play that position, I actually need to see it with my own eyes.
Is Martin Rennie waiting for him to grow back the hair so he can put the headband back?
I don't know what the reason is, but I mean, having been with the team for a year and a half and not getting the opportunity in a league game, what does that say? If the coaching staff doesn't have the confidence in you, then bring in a player you have the confidence in to actually to actually play them in a game. It's no use being on the roster if you're just there to take up a roster spot. You either give him an opportunity in a game so then we can actually judge him against MLS competition, or you find another player. To have someone just take up that roster spot and say, okay, well, we have Greg there, but if Greg doesn't play, then how can you really judge? I'm willing to give him a shot in the game and see what happens and go from there, because every time I've seen him, whether it be reserve play or in the Voyageurs Cup games, he has been, a pleasant surprise in my mind. So I want to give him a shot.
He hasn't YP Lee hasn't exactly been so wonderful going forward. Even when he does get forward, his crossing leaves a lot to be desired. He's a lot better in possession, doing the short passes. But it's not as if trying Greg out on the as a right fullback would be a huge detriment to your team going forward either. He may not be as smart positionally, but man, for what he lacks in his positional ability, he makes up for in his athleticism.
Sure,
the man he's very quick, and he can run all day. He can bomb down the right wing all game long, and he has no problem getting back when he needs to.
Reminds me of a right fullback we used to have.
This is one of the things. Let's see it. Let's see it before we write it off completely.
I think, back to a couple of things you said, Michael, I think for me, Alain Rochat has to play. Like, I prefer him to play left back or perhaps on the left side somewhere, as opposed to center back or even holding midfielder primarily. But to me, if Alain Rochat's in your team, he needs to play. He's the kind of guy where if he's going through some poor form, I think we need to ride that out because of his experience, because of his abilities, because of his quality. For me personally, I wouldn't say that about every player in the side, but I think Alain Rochat with his experience needs to be there.
But how long do you give him playing badly?
I mean,
He's not
sure. It hasn't been. Yeah, it hasn't been ideal, but it's not like he's been the worst player on the park either. So I mean, and I think that goes hand in hand with poor team performances as well. It's been. I think our sample size is too small at this point in time to say, we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. A little bit more time I want to see to kind of ride this out, like Zach said, and if that opportunity is, maybe defensively he hasn't been as great on the road. If he plays in the midfield, either in a central position or out wide, I think with his qualities, that's a player we need on the park more times than not, because I think we're a worse team with him on the bench.
I also just want to say this, that our podcast does not recommend throwing the baby out of the bathwater at any time. But getting back to that, I think the thing I think about Rochat is, with him, he was such a good player on the bad teams that's where people are wondering what's going on with him. That they see a decline, because he was I personally think the best player in the first year, and even the second year I thought he was one of the top players. So this team has all of a sudden gotten better depth-wise and everything, talent-wise, but all of a sudden his plays slipped, and that's where the question I think a lot of people are wondering.
He used to be so consistent, and that was what was great about him, is that if he had a poor game, he didn't have two. Is that he'd come back the next game and he would be the same old Alain that we always knew.
To me, he's just such a class player, and I know for him one of the big things about team, and so I don't think this is maybe something that has been a negative for this year. I know one of the big things for him personally is the cohesion, is the chemistry of the team, which I know in the first couple of years, especially in the second year when things were kind of blown up or some things were tried in the middle of the year, were very difficult. So I know that's one of the things that has been not ideal for him in some ways. Like, I've heard him talk about the chemistry. So I don't think that's an issue right now, but I don't know why. I hear what you're saying. We're playing better, and when we were playing bad, he seemed great, and now that we're playing better, he doesn't seem as great. Is that what you're saying, Steve?
Yeah. Basically, yeah. No, it's kind of like I thought this year he would progress with the team and even play better. I thought because he wouldn't have so many responsibilities doing other things, like he wouldn't have to be covering for other people or doing this stuff, that he would actually be his game would be even elevated even more. I know he's getting a year older and everything, but I thought it was going to be, if not the same level, better.
I wonder if any of that has to do with the fact that Jay DeMerit's now gone.
Yeah,
and so it seemed like the two of them had a really good relationship on the field, off the field, whatever it may be. They both really seemed. Anytime Alain was out of position, you would see Jay DeMerit coming out of nowhere, off screen, and he would, with some crazy slide tackle that would cover up for a mistake of Alain's or vice versa. And I wonder if perhaps now he's a little bit worrisome with, Andy O'Brien, who's been just an absolute stud in the back, but he's not exactly. He wasn't quite the leader of the back line that
or the most fleet of foot either.
Exactly. And they've been breaking in a new player only a couple weeks at a time, either Brad Russin or Johnny Leverone, who he can't communicate with probably at all, maybe just very limited. So I wonder if that maybe has a real mental effect on him, on his game.
Well, I can say for one thing, the Chivas goal, the second one, I can tell you that it was clear that he had no confidence in Brad Russin, and that's why the other guy was wide open who scored the goal. I can't remember who it was. Eric.
Well, that was Russin left his man.
Yeah, Russin left his man, and he had no confidence in Russin getting back to his man, so he overcommitted, and then that were left.
There's been a few times.
So you could tell a little bit that there was a lack of confidence in Russin.
There's been a couple times this year where the two of those together have kind of shared blame on a goal. Yeah. and that's normally not the case with Elaine. And it probably raises the question of whether or not it's been that confidence in Russell.
It goes back to Michael's comment about cohesion, about you wanted to see more consistency in the starting 11, and I think my response to that is we haven't really had the opportunity that much. I mean, there hasn't been that many injuries, but it's not like they all happened at one time either. It's you initially had Demerit, and then you had Kenny Miller, and then you had kind of the inconsistency with the youngsters in Kakuta Mane and Hurtado, and then in addition to that, you had the revolving center back position. So all those things, it's like, we're trying to feel out all these new players, and so yes, I mean, I don't believe Martin Rennie's had the same starting 11 for any game this year, or if it has been the same starting 11, it hasn't been more than twice, that's for sure. And so, given that fact, I mean, I don't know how much blame I really put, I don't know how much blame I really put on the coach in that respect, because he's had to deal with some of these issues, and I think it still is kind of early in the season, even though we're a third of the way in or whatever. I still think there still is a bit of a feeling out process, and so it will be, I think, a couple more weeks before we really have a good idea of where this team is, what its best starting 11 is, and it's going to take some time for us to get to that point.
I think this brings up a great point, and it comes back to what you were talking about as well, Michael, is that the whole starting 11 idea of consistency. There was an article on MLS.com, I think it was this week, following our match with Portland interview, I think with Caleb Porter, I think it was, and the title was Portland's secret to their away form, or some sensationalist title, and basically one of the...
They're getting lucky.
No, I'm not sure if it was the thesis of the article.
They're playing basketball.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was the thesis or the exact main point, but one of the things was they said is we have a consistent 11, and I think that came from Caleb, and a few of the players said we have a settled side. We know who's playing. Everyone knows their role, and that's one of the things that made our away matches our away results so positive. And this ties in also with the bigger idea of how are you playing when you have a settled side. It's easier to play consistent home and road. For us, I think, with that question we maybe partly answered earlier, or maybe not fully, but when you hear the gaffer going on Whitecaps FC Daily with Peter and say, we're not playing that different, or we're not sending them out to play that differently, and I think that's true. I think that they're not telling them things that are super philosophically different in how they're playing at home on the road. I think they are just saying, let's be a little bit more solid, ideally at the back on the road. So I think at home I think part of it is they are given more freedom to get forward and to be creative in the final third, and maybe even in the middle third. Whereas on the road, I think that freedom is not as much there.
Okay, well, let's move on to one final topic for this episode of the podcast, and let's switch it to the other end of the pitch. Who would you like to see playing up front? How many would you like to see playing? And should we trade Darren Mattocks?
I thought we just traded him to the JFF.
I think the Darren Mattocks is the stereotypical sophomore slump. The player coming into his second year as a professional, had some success in year number one, perhaps was very boastful about it and thought that year number two was going to be great.
The word's confident,
and didn't. I don't want to assume things, but maybe his off-season preparations weren't what it needed to be, or things like that, or maybe he mentally wasn't focused, expecting the success to be there. I don't know, but I think he still has the talent to be there. And if it's just the fact of it's a second-year pro who's kind of going through a downtime, I have full confidence he's going to rebound from that. Whether it's this year or not, I don't know, but I think he's a quality player that will produce for the Whitecaps in the future. But up front, I think, it really kind of bothered me in a way when people were like, oh, wow, what a great game Camilo had up front. Well, the fact is, his most success that he had in the Whitecaps, and perhaps the only thing Tommy Sowen ever did good, was play Camilo up top. And that's the time when he scored the most goals and had the most success for us, was the end of year number one, when he was playing up top. And so I think that's where he needs to be. That's where he's going to be the most successful. That's where we're going to get the most production out of him. And so if we want that out of Camilo, he can't be playing out wide. He's got to be in a position where he's near the goal, where he can take on defenders centrally and slip and slide and make runs that are difficult for the center backs. I don't know whether it's in a 4-4-2 formation with the Kelly Miller or with the Darren Mattocks. I don't know. We still need to see that yet. But I think that's one of the number one names on the first name on the team sheet, and in that exact spot is Camilo at the top, not out of wide.
Okay, I'll kind of make one thing, because this has bugged me because people don't really talk about this much. I agree, Camilo has been an incredible part of the Whitecaps MLS story and thing, and I agree that it was good. The decision Tommy made was good. One thing that bugs me when people talk about year one and they talk about how great Camilo was and how he was our MVP and all that kind of stuff is, and you can.
I didn't say he was our MVP though.
Oh, okay, but people did.
I do that.
Okay, people did in general. And you please correct me if I'm totally out to lunch on this. One of the things that happened in those final few months of 2011 was Eric was not in great form, and we were playing the audition for 2012 game, right? And so Eric was not started. Eric and Davide were both not starting those last. It felt like a month and a half, 2 months. They were not starting any of those games, not because they shouldn't or they couldn't or whatever. I think part of it had to do with form. Part of it was because let's give Nizar a try. Let's try some of these things, some of these players out. I think Long Tan got some minutes and got that header against DC.
I think partly was because those specific players probably told the coach their feelings about him.
I think that the relationship between some of those players and Tommy Sohn, I think, was definitely a part of it. If you look at, you can go back to the stories of what happened between Tommy Sohn and Maluda Cool, but that's another story. But so that all happens at the end of 2011. You might want to edit all this out, and that's fine. But at the end of 2011, Camilo is starting and getting all the minutes. We have the game against RSL, second last game of the year, whatever it was. 2 penalties, he gets both of them. He ends on 12 goals. Eric ends on 10. We live in a North American culture where goals is the most important thing, and he's voted most valuable player of the year. I'm not saying that he wouldn't still win if he had 10 and Eric had 10 or vice versa or whatever. But I think Camilo in 2011 benefited from being given the confidence of the coach at the time. And I think that would have been a totally different picture.
Sure, yeah.
Had the coach played. Had the coach not done what he did in terms of giving certain players
that's
time.
fine, and let's not revisit.
I think
who should have been MVP and who shouldn't have been MVP.
I know.
But the fact is, he got that opportunity, and he showed that he can succeed in that position. Right. So let's learn from that.
I don't disagree with you in the position thing.
Okay.
I'm just saying when people are like, "Yeah, 2011 when the Whitecaps was the year of Camilo."
No. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying that he showed he can be successful as a front striker and not a wide player.
See, this is what Hot Dog does to the people,
let's go from there.
Hot Dog does this to people. It divides people all the time.
What?
Hot Dog.
Schnitzel.
Oh, that's why I call Tommy Sohn now. Just Hot Dog. I don't know. I'm trying not to mention
Hot Dog.
But
Yeah, no. So. I agree with you, the positionally and all that kind of stuff. It just bugs me when people talk about 2011. They're like, Camilo was our best player.
In all fairness, though, Eric Hasley, I don't want to dwell too much on the first year stuff, but Eric Hasley did score quite a few PK goals. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, including goals that Camilo created. Yeah. So they both benefit from each other. That's how the team game works.
Well, I'm just saying if Eric plays in some of those even in that one game, those penalties are his, and he ends on 12 and
he'd have probably missed him anyway. The form he was in.
No, come on.
Okay, I think it goes back to the question.
Yep.
What should our formation be up front? I don't have an answer. Camilo needs to be there. That's all I know. Next.
So I think when you're talking about who should be playing up front, I think one of the things that we need to talk about or whatever is in this 4, as I'm using the quotations with my fingers right now, in this 4-3-3, it really is like a 4-2-3-1. We are playing with one real striker and ideally 2 wingers, wide players, or midfielders that are playing wide or whatever. And so we are playing with a lone striker essentially. So. I think I've been surprised in the preseason and in the little bit of the season that Kenny has played at how I think positive his influence has been and how effective he's been in that the middle of that 3, the middle of the 3 if you call it a 4-2-3-1 or that attacking midfielder
with John Ford.
With John Ford, yeah, with John Ford is a better name for it in that 4-3-3 formation. So I think when he's healthy and he should be available for selection on Wednesday, I think he's another option in that role there. Who should be playing up top, I think also just depends on a little bit how we want to play and who we're playing, kind of thing. So if we're going, I do think Camilo should be in the lineup somewhere, and I think there's a strong case for him being that top guy. I really appreciate what Corey has brought. I really appreciate what Tommy has brought. I would probably start a Camilo or even a Darren, who we'll see on Wednesday maybe for part, but we won't see for a couple weeks after that. I think those are probably should be one of those two should be in that central role.
I don't think it's any question that on this current season's form that Camilo has been the best center forward that we've had as far as. It's hard to say that, I suppose, on just a single game up top, but he has shown the best ability as a center forward to be able to hold the ball and to create and to bring people in around him. Whereas when you see guys like Darren Mattocks out there, they've been on an island by themselves, whether that's his own fault or the fault of those around him. It's been really hard for the center forward to actually get involved in a game. Whereas when Camilo was there, he was everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think right now you have to give it to Camilo. The only problem that you run into then, if you're playing with a single forward, is that now the player who you were having on your left wing, who is kind of Camilo plays on the left wing, but he does drift towards the middle a lot. Now you have to replace that with somebody, and who do you put on the left wing? Do you put Russell in that position? And then who's your attacking midfielder? And there's a real trickle-down effect to that, whereas Camilo has shown that he's at least... I would much prefer him as a center forward, but he's shown that he's not a bad left winger either for us.
Yeah, but I think he's better up top. And I think we've already talked about those options. I think Russell is a primary option to play left side, even though I think he's probably better centrally, because I think centrally you have Russell, you have Daigo, and you have Kenny. I think those are the three best options there. I think Russell can play that.
I'm a huge supporter of Russell, and I think that right now he has to be in your starting 11.
I agree.
That being said, I think that as a young player, he's in form right now, and I think he will still be a contributing member of this squad throughout the entire season. But on the left side, he seems to have a tendency to slip in and out of games a little more than he does when he's in a central role, just because he's almost forced to be more involved. Yeah. So that's why I would prefer to keep him in a central role.
The other thing about playing Russell, actually, what they did in Montreal, what I heard in Montreal was that he's playing on the right side because they want that natural connection between him and Nigel. That they have as like a relationship. They wanted Russell on the right to connect with Nigel because Nigel's playing right back. They put Russell on the right because of that,
and that's obvious in training.
You
see them.
What I would like to see is just going to 4-4-2, which is not going to happen. But if we were playing two strikers up front, I'd like to have Camilo and Miller when Miller's fit. Then when Miller isn't fit, I'd like to see Herzog in there, because Herzog, I know he gets a bit of a bad rap from some, but he's there as a poacher, and there's not many poachers around at the moment. He will feed off the crumbs, but he needs to play up there with someone. He cannot play on his own up front.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
And the thing with Miller is, obviously, the lure of going to play against East Fife is going to be way too much for him. And I mean, he'll go, because 2,000 at Bayview, it's just too much for him to resist that.
Is he really the long-term answer, though? Like, are you going to re-sign him after next season anyway? No, it doesn't seem like he's going to.
We're going to discuss that in the next podcast.
So, Michael, question for you: how do you deal with Steve's time? Because obviously he's doing a lot of work for you and other people, and obviously he's working for 442 magazine and trying to sell subscriptions for them here today.
What are we talking about? Oh,
you keep saying.
We're gonna end this podcast with a quick lightning round. Really quick, short answers, not too long. You can elaborate a little bit.
We're going to call this section 30 Seconds to Mars.
I need a Mars bar, a Rage bar to help me through the day. I need a Mars bar, a tattoo fall. It helps me, makes me rugged and play. 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 Work, rest, and
So, this is our new game show element which we're introducing called 30 Seconds to Mars. Each of our contestants will get 30 seconds to talk about various subjects. For each good point they make, they'll get a point and a little ding. And whoever gets the most points by the end of it all will win a Mars bar.
What's the loser get? Not on
The
podcast
rapper.
next week?
Well, the loser doesn't get diabetes, so that's actually probably a plus point. So I'll hand you over to our hostess with the mostess, Steve.
Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, so first question. Other than Nigel Rio-Coker, who has been the best newcomer to the Whitecaps? And why do you think that?
Zach, 30 seconds.
2013?
This season, yes.
Oh, best
obviously.
newcomer. I think Corey Herzog has been a great addition for where he's come from, his price, and all that. So I think Corey has been great. Corey, because of what as Michael was saying, he's a poacher. He brings something else that we kind of don't necessarily have. He brings a different element to our strike force. I like too his age. I think his contract is good for our salary cap issues.
Okay, so
That's
that's
your
30
30
seconds.
seconds.
Oh, I thought I said something wrong. So I only got 1 point. Oh.
Yeah, because he would let you elaborate.
But you.
This is going to be a.
I was gonna go on to
wonderful
other.
game show.
We're work in
Michael
progress.
It's Michael calling the points, not me.
If I don't agree with you, you get,
They get the
points.
same question. They get,
Okay, so Jay.
As much as he hasn't actually played that much, I'm going to have to say Johnny Leverone. Just because... Oh, you already like that. Just because it looks like him and O'Brien have actually formed a partnership that has been very solid. It looks like he's the first guy who can actually move forward from defense. He's good with the ball on his feet, and he has a left foot that can push it up to our speed guys like a Kikuta Mane or Eric Hurtado on the wing. In addition to the fact that he's still young and he still has a lot of
only one round?
Time. Mass.
I'll give you some more points. When I listen to it
I
again.
hate to sound repetitive here, but the answer definitely is Johnny Leverone. Even though it has only been a few games, already you are starting to see the quality and the, as much as I don't want to say it, the improvement over Brad Russin, I think, is evident in the center back position after a couple of games. Besides that, besides Nigel Rio-Coker, I really think you need to say that
it's a point for beside that.
I don't know.
I think you really need to say that the rest of these so-called newcomers have not lived up to billing. We have not seen the performances from the youngsters, the draft picks that we expected to have at this point in time. They were supposed to be the depth that was supposed to take us to the next level, and we haven't seen that yet. Yeah, Herzog and Heinemann are good, are good fill-ins, but they're not going to be the quality that's going to really make us the next level team that we want to be. So besides Leverone and Rio-Coker, the newcomers haven't shone too bright.
That was over 30 seconds, but I was enjoying what Mars was saying there.
Can I
I've
go-
lost complete control on this.
Can I go again? I'd like to change my answer to Johnny Leverone.
Okay, so next question. We're going to start off with Jay. Is there anybody that they miss from the players that they let go last season?
Oh, good question. I'll say that we miss... the easy answer would be Davide Cumiento, but what I am going to say is Eric Hasley, just because as much as I really didn't like him at the end, we haven't had a player who could hold the ball and who could be extremely clinical when he gets the ball up front.
We didn't have that when we had Hasley.
As well as the fact that not necessarily but the marketing, but the chemistry and the enjoyment that I got out of a game watching Eric and Davide is something that I certainly miss.
Oh, it's a shame no points scored there, Jimmy.
You gotta be kidding me. Wait,
I think
wait, we got to do this in the sound this room.
You got to do 30 seconds later. Go, Mass.
I think the answer is everybody who left, besides Barry Robson, perhaps. The fact is that the losses of Davide Cumiento, Eric Hasley, Sebastian Letou, and even Dane Richards, during their times here, they all brought positive things. And I've said it a million times that last year was an unnecessary revolution that occurred to the squad. It was obvious the downswing that happened when all those players, were let go or left. They were never adequately replaced. They still haven't been adequately replaced at this point in time. Even though they weren't perhaps the most effective players, or they had deficiencies, as a collective group, that was the best team we've had had the three in the 2.5 years we've been in MLS, and the fact is that those guys are missed. That's for sure.
Excellent.
I didn't know this was just the agree with Michael competition.
Okay, Zach. Anybody specific that they missed?
I think I'm going to go back to 2011 because that's been my motto today. We missed Tater Torderson. Okay. I miss Tater Torderson. I love Martin Rennie, but I miss Tater Torderson because he was so good to supporters. He put supporters. He put us. Yeah, he was so good to us, and not just in the coming over and clapping or whatever, but in the relationship that he built with supporters, coming out and hanging out and coming before games and telling us the starting lineup and telling us what tactics. And
maybe if he had done less of that, he could have had a better team on the pitch.
Perhaps the way every training session you went to, he would come after and he would hang out, have a conversation, and usually tell you one thing where he would say, "But don't tell that to anyone else." I greatly miss him.
And I appreciated you telling me.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, that's 2011. I think last year is mostly spoken for. But again, I have to say that I mostly miss Eric and Davide.
30 seconds. Who's on the clock?
I know,
Come on, where's the buzzer?
This isn't so much a lightning round. As
Well, you're control of the buzzer too.
right. This one you just get 30 seconds. It's
Okay.
gonna be tough.
So we're gonna start with Mass this one. Bigger injury impact from the beginning of the season, Jay DeMeritt or Kenny Miller?
Surprisingly, if you would have asked me at the time when both of them would have gone out, obviously I think the answer would have been Jay DeMeritt. But Russin has not been the greatest, but I think he's been adequate. The answer I'm going to give you is Kenny Miller. I think up top, we have missed him. With Darren Mattocks' struggles, I think it's been extra evident why we've missed him. The fact that we haven't played Camilo in that position, is that another reason why we've missed him? The amount of options he gives us, either playing as a withdrawn striker or as a striker, is more than Jay DeMeritt. So that's the answer.
Okay, so Zach.
Obviously, I'm playing for consolation with Jay here on this, but I will say
No favoritism.
I will say the exact opposite. Actually, I thought we were going to miss Jay less, and I think we miss him more. I think one of the reasons why we have not got more clean sheets and we've not played more compact and tighter at the back is because we have missed Jay. Andy O'Brien has done a great job at leading the back line. Johnny Leveron has been a great surprise or a great addition as he's been put into the team. However, there is something so intangible about what Jay brings to the team. His leadership, his charisma, his bone-crunching tackles.
Don't mention bone crunching.
Jay.
It's a good question. What I'll say is that I can't pick now where we are two guys who would have been missed more on the team than these two. I wasn't a huge fan of Jay as far as your number one center back before, but now that we've missed him, I think we really miss the guy who's leading the back line, and I think we miss a guy who has created a lot of chemistry with the players that are around him as well. So I'm going to have to say Jay DeMeritt, just because I don't know if Kenny Miller is necessarily the answer up top. I think he's a good he contributes quite well. But I think Jay DeMeritt is the reason why our defensive has looked in shambles so often.
Okay.
Oh, I got like 8 points there. That must be.
No, that was just the end, of
okay.
the game.
Oh, I thought we were a couple.
Are there any more rounds?
okay.
Are there any more rounds?
No, let's just
My last couple questions were good.
well, you can keep those for the next
Okay.
time. So at the end of that, we have in third place Jay with 8 points.
Thank you.
You're the winner because you don't get diabetes.
In second place, Zach with 11 points.
What? Steve.
Just catching him up.
Yes, Steve had you as a winner.
Yeah.
No, I missed.
You've already won today, Bayern won. And the winner of the first Mars Bar is Massimo with 13 points.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
He needs the added weight, anyways. He's real.
So thanks to everyone for making it to the end of this podcast. We're going to be back with another one quite soon. So just goodbye from all our guests. If you want to let people know where they can find you online, if they can find you online, Steve?
At Whitecaps Beat and ready for Post America.
Zach?
At Zachary AM on Twitter, or you can get us Master I guess, and others at Curva Collective on Twitter or on Facebook as well.
Jay?
At J_Duke, and on the fantastic AFTN Canada website on Canadian Soccer News.
And Mass.
At Mass Cusano, MASS Cusano. And you don't get too much action from me, but every once in a while you'll get some crazy ramblings.
A bit like Darren Mattocks, not much action. So thanks for listening. I'm Michael McCall. You can find me on Twitter at AFTN Canada. You can read AFTN on Canadian Soccer News at aftn.ca. So we'll be back with another podcast soon. So thanks for listening and take care.